The air feels heavy, like a storm about to break. Oprah leans forward, her voice measured but sharp enough to slice through the hum of the studio. Then tell America, Jasmine, who exactly do you serve? For half a heartbeat, no one moves. The crowd's murmurs die instantly, replaced by that electric kind of silence only live television can hold. Jasmine Crockett blinks once, twice, the gleam in her eyes flickering between fury and disbelief. She opens her mouth, but nothing comes out. A cough echoes from the audience. A camera red light flares. Somewhere in the control room, a producer whispers, "Keep rolling." Oprah doesn't move. Her expression is calm, almost too calm, the kind that says she's seen storms like this before and knows exactly how to survive them. Across from her, Jasmine shifts in her chair, searching for footing that isn't there. Her hands, perfectly manicured, tighten around the cue cards she's no longer reading. You can feel the power shift without a word. The audience feels it too, some lean forward, others glance toward the exit as if they've just realized they're witnessing something no network will easily replay. Who do I serve? Jasmine finally repeats, her tone half scoff, half stall. That's an interesting question, Oprah. A smile touches Oprah's lips, not mockery, but something more dangerous, patience. Every camera zooms in. Every heartbeat syncs with the steady hum of the lights. It's the moment the line between conversation and confrontation quietly disappears. Then, just as Jasmine starts to recover, Oprah speaks again, softly, like a mother correcting a child. No, it's a simple one. The silence stretches so long it starts to feel like music. In the control booth, someone mutters, "We're trending already." And they are. Clips spreading, hashtags forming, threads exploding before the interview even ends, because beneath that single question lies everything this moment represents: power, truth, ego, and the rare courage to demand clarity in front of millions. But to understand how this moment shattered daytime television, we need to go back 6 minutes earlier. No one, not even Oprah, expected what would happen next. 6 minutes earlier, the studio buzzed with the polished calm that comes before a televised storm. The banners gleamed with the familiar gold "Conversations with Oprah" lettering, and the audience, a blend of students, professionals, and first-time voters, sat expectantly, phones tilted just slightly toward the stage. They weren't here for small talk. They were here for a reckoning. Jasmine Crockett had been booked as the rising voice of a new generation of politics. Sharp, articulate, fearless, that's how her team sold her. But headlines over the past few weeks had turned her confidence into controversy. Comments about old ideals and outdated morality had set social media ablaze. To some, she was bold. To others, reckless. To Oprah, she was a test of whether power still meant responsibility in the America that was changing faster than its conscience could keep up. Oprah greeted her with the warmth she's known for, the steady voice, the disarming smile. Jasmine matched it with charisma polished from countless press hits, that smile of practiced certainty that comes from knowing millions are watching. Yet beneath that glow, the tension was tangible. The air wasn't just thick with lights, it was heavy with something unspoken, the clash between two eras of influence. "You've become a symbol," Oprah began, leaning back just slightly. "Some call you the voice of a new truth. Others call you a headline waiting to happen. Which one do you see?" The crowd murmured in delight. Jasmine grinned, brushing it off like applause. "I think people fear what they can't control," she replied. "I don't fit the mold. That's what bothers them." It was smooth, confident, rehearsed, the kind of line meant to trend in sound bites. But Oprah didn't flinch. Her gaze lingered, patient, almost parental. "And yet," she said softly, "truth doesn't need to fit a mold to be accountable." The sentence hung between them like glass, clear but dangerous. The audience's smiles began to fade. They could sense it, the shift from dialogue to duel. What made it matter wasn't just two women speaking from different generations. It was what they represented. Oprah, the icon who had spent decades bridging divides through empathy and listening. Jasmine, the bold disruptor, unwilling to bow to any system that demanded humility before fame. One stood for legacy, the other for disruption. And in the America watching, that conflict ran deeper than politics. It was identity itself. In living rooms across the country, viewers already felt the heat rising. Immigrant families saw reflections of generational clashes at their own dinner tables, respect versus rebellion, patience versus pride. For millions, this wasn't about Oprah or Jasmine. It was about what happens when ambition forgets where it came from. Jasmine crossed her legs, adjusted her mic, and smiled. The lights caught the shimmer of her bracelet. She thought she had the upper hand, youth, energy, a narrative the internet adored. But the calm in Oprah's eyes told another story. When Oprah finally asked her next question, it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be it was the kind of question that made even the air hesitate, and that's when Jasmine's smile stiffened, still bright, still flawless, but a fraction too forced, because behind that smile, something darker was brewing. Before the studio lights, before Oprah's question that cut the room in half, Jasmine Crockett had already become something larger than herself, a name that could ignite comment sections within seconds. To her followers, she was the spark the system feared, unfiltered, unapologetic, unbreakable. To her critics, she was the noise drowning out meaning. Somewhere between the two, Jasmine built an empire, and a trap. Her rise was fast, almost cinematic. A viral clip here, a fiery soundbite there, a moment of defiance replayed across millions of screens. She'd cut through every political panel like a blade through glass. The formula was simple: interrupt first, dominate the frame, leave no silence unfilled. It wasn't about persuasion, it was about control. In a world addicted to outrage, Jasmine became its fluent speaker. There was one interview, 2 years before this Oprah moment, that everyone still remembered, the one that first put her name in headlines. Sitting across from a conservative host twice her age, she'd leaned forward and declared, "I will never let anyone silence me, ever." The clip exploded online. Memes crowned her a queen. Hashtags hailed her a warrior. Overnight, she wasn't just a politician, she was a performance. But something subtle began to change after that. The more she spoke, the less people listened. Not because she lost her voice, but because she used it everywhere, all at once. Every issue became a battlefield, every question a provocation. When one interviewer tried to ask about policy, she rolled her eyes mid-sentence, muttering, "Next question, please, I don't debate ghosts." Laughter from her supporters filled the room, but those watching from home felt something else: exhaustion. It wasn't that she was wrong. It was that she refused to be questioned. Her power thrived on confrontation, not connection. And soon, the cracks began to show. Clips began circulating of her shouting down colleagues, cutting off journalists, waving off criticism as jealousy in disguise. She mistook applause for agreement, trends for truth. Each headline made her louder, each viral moment made her harder to reach. It's easy to stand tall when the crowd below you is clapping, until you realize they've stopped listening and started waiting for the next fight. Comment sections turned from cheers to sighs. "She never listens. I used to like her, but she talks over everyone. Does she even care what's being asked anymore?" Even her allies began to distance themselves, quietly skipping her calls, citing scheduling conflicts. In public, they smiled beside her. In private, they whispered about fatigue, about a woman who mistook volume for victory. Still, Jasmine pressed on. Every backlash became proof she was right. Every critic became a hater. She'd built an armor so thick that no truth could pass through it, not even her own. She saw herself as untouchable, and that illusion was her favorite mirror. One night, during a late podcast taping, the host asked her gently, "Do you ever think about listening more than talking?" Jasmine laughed, head tilted, eyes glinting with practiced charm. "Listening," she said, "is just waiting for your turn to speak." The host chuckled nervously. The internet didn't. It wasn't the first time she'd said something controversial, but this time, it didn't go viral for empowerment. It went viral for everything wrong with power. The clip resurfaced again and again, stitched into montages of her interruptions, her smirks, her relentless need to have the last word, and yet, she didn't see the shift. Surrounded by advisors who feared her temper more than her downfall, she mistook loyalty for silence. The people cheering her weren't allies anymore, they were spectators, waiting for the next spark to light. So when Oprah invited her, Jasmine saw it not as a challenge, but a coronation. "I'll set the record straight," she told her manager, her tone full of certainty. "She's a legend, but I'm the moment." The irony was almost poetic, because what Jasmine didn't realize was that the same voice that had built her fame was now echoing in an empty hall. The world wasn't hanging on her words anymore, it was holding its breath, wondering when she'd finally stop talking long enough to hear herself. And in that silence waiting to happen, you could already sense it, the unraveling of a persona mistaken for power. Power without humility eventual. Silence is itself. Before the stage lights and applause, before the name became an empire, Oprah Winfrey was just a little girl in a small wooden house in Mississippi, a place where voices were often raised but rarely heard. She grew up learning that silence wasn't weakness, sometimes it was survival. Her grandmother's words still echo in her mind whenever the world gets loud. Baby, the ones who shout the loudest usually got the least to say. That truth became her compass. She learned to listen before she learned to lead. To observe before she spoke. In school, while others competed to be seen, Oprah watched the way people's faces changed when they were understood, how even the angriest softened when someone truly heard them. Long before television found her, she was already practicing the oldest art of connection, presence. Life didn't give her much softness. Poverty, prejudice, loss, the shadows were real and heavy. But she carried herself through them with quiet rebellion. Every book she read, every story she absorbed, became armor made not of arrogance but empathy. When the world told her to harden, she chose instead to feel. That decision, to stay open, would one day define her power. In her early 20s, when she first walked into a newsroom, they told her she didn't look like television. Too emotional, too expressive, too herself. The industry wanted polish, she gave them truth. And slowly, truth began to win. Viewers didn't just watch her, they trusted her. Because she didn't interview people, she invited them to unfold. Years later, when the world crowned her a billionaire, when her name became a brand, and her face a symbol, she still remembered the barefoot girl on the red clay road who whispered to herself, "You don't need to raise your voice to rise." That's why this interview, the one with Jasmine Crockett, mattered to her in ways no one fully saw. It wasn't just about politics. It was about legacy, about what kind of power would define the next generation. In the quiet before the cameras rolled that morning, Oprah sat in her dressing room, sipping tea and rereading her notes. A producer entered to confirm timing, but she wasn't really listening. Her mind was elsewhere, on the millions of young women who'd grown up in a louder, harsher world than hers, where fame came faster than understanding. "Do you ever get tired?" her assistant once asked her. Oprah smiled, setting her cup down. "Of talking? No. But sometimes, of being heard by people who aren't listening." It wasn't bitterness. It was experience. She'd seen what happened when conversation became competition. When truth became performance. And watching Jasmine Crockett rise, fierce, intelligent, magnetic, Oprah recognized something familiar, the hunger to be seen. But without reflection, hunger turns into noise. Oprah had once been there too, desperate to prove herself, to never again be dismissed or invisible. The difference was, life had taught her the value of restraint. There's an old clip buried deep in her archives, a young Oprah on local news, defending a community project that others mocked. Her voice shook slightly, but her eyes didn't flinch. "If you care enough to understand," she said, "you'll see why this matters." That line, half forgotten by the world, defined everything she'd become. Now, decades later, she faced a guest who represented the opposite, someone whose confidence outpaced her compassion. And yet, Oprah didn't see Jasmine as an enemy. She saw a reflection of every young person taught that volume equals value. She saw herself, once raw and fiery, trying to build strength from sound instead of substance. That's what made her dangerous, not to Jasmine, but to the illusion Jasmine lived in. Oprah wasn't coming to win. She was coming to redefine. When she walked from the green room to the stage, she didn't rehearse lines. She didn't plan a confrontation. She simply carried the same quiet conviction that had always guided her: truth doesn't shout. It stands. The audience saw elegance, the flowing navy suit, the steady smile. But what they didn't see was the weight of decades behind that calm. Every insult endured. Every doubt overcome. Every voice that once tried to drown her out now taught her how to stay anchored. As the countdown to live began, Oprah closed her eyes for just a second. She thought of her grandmother again, of that small kitchen where she first learned that power without grace corrodes itself. Then she looked up, and there was Jasmine, already talking fast, laughing at something off camera, charming the crew with practiced ease. It would have been easy to match her energy, to rise to the noise. But Oprah stayed still. That's how she always won, by being the quiet center in everyone else's storm. When the floor manager's hand dropped and the show went live, the room transformed. Applause thundered, lights flared, cameras blinked awake. Oprah smiled warmly, greeted her guest, asked the first few questions, gentle, probing, deliberate. Jasmine answered each one with confidence, even wit. The audience laughed, clapped, leaned in. It all looked normal, a graceful dance of ideas, but something subtle was shifting. Beneath Oprah's calm tone was a precision that Jasmine hadn't felt yet, a rhythm building beneath the conversation, like a tide quietly turning. Oprah wasn't cornering her. She was guiding her toward a truth Jasmine didn't yet see coming, and somewhere, deep inside the calm of Oprah's gaze, the moment was already forming, the point where silence would do what sound never could, because soon, very soon, she would finally stand her ground. The tension returned the instant the cameras found their rhythm again. The applause from the commercial break faded, leaving only the low hum of stage lights and the faint shuffle of audience feet. Oprah smiled, steady and composed, her fingers loosely clasped in her lap. Jasmine leaned forward, restless energy radiating from her like heat. "So let's talk about accountability," Oprah said evenly, her voice the same one America had trusted for decades. "You've spoken about changing the system from within. What does that mean to you, exactly?" Jasmine's laugh came quick and practiced. "It means saying what others are afraid to say, Oprah. It means not wasting time on polite conversation when the world is burning." The crowd gave a few scattered claps, unsure if it was a line or a warning. Oprah nodded, the kind of nod that both honors and disarms. "And when that fire catches people who didn't light it?" Jasmine smirked. "Collateral damage. Change isn't clean. It's loud, messy, uncomfortable." The words hung sharp in the air. Oprah let them breathe, just long enough for their weight to reveal itself. "Uncomfortable, yes," she replied softly. "But destruction and progress aren't the same language." Jasmine's smile faltered for the briefest second, then she recovered, leaning closer as if proximity could dominate the space between them. "With all respect, Oprah, the older generation loves to talk about patience. But patience doesn't get people fed. It doesn't change laws. You built your career on empathy, I'm building mine on action." "Action without empathy," Oprah countered, "turns into ego dressed as justice." A murmur rippled through the audience, a wave of breath and shifting posture. Cameras cut between faces, capturing the discomfort, the thrill, the unmistakable pull of confrontation. Jasmine laughed again, higher this time. "You know, people said the same thing to me when I started. That I was too bold, too direct. But if being bold makes people uncomfortable, maybe it's because truth finally showed up. Or maybe," Oprah said, still smiling, "because truth doesn't need to shout to be heard." That line, quiet, clean, undeniable, hit like a bell. The audience's reaction split in two, some gasped, others clapped before realizing they weren't supposed to. Jasmine shifted in her seat, her smile tightening. "I think you're underestimating how much the world's changed," she shot back. "People want leaders who speak their language. Who fight back." Oprah's eyes never wavered. "Fighting back is easy," she said. "Standing still when the storm hits, that's leadership." Jasmine tilted her head, the deflection coming faster now. "You think calmness is courage? Tell that to the people suffering while everyone else stays calm." Oprah didn't flinch. "I have. For 40 years." The audience froze. Even Jasmine blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of the answer. Oprah's tone didn't rise, but the room's energy did, that slow climb toward a breaking point, a moment so dense that sound itself feels hesitant to exist inside it. Jasmine crossed her arms, voice sharpening. "You think I don't care about people? You think I'm just loud?" Oprah's response came with the softness of truth, not accusation. "I think you care deeply. I just wonder if you care to listen." Gasps. Actual gasps. A few people covered their mouths. Jasmine laughed again, but it cracked, not from humor, but defense. "That's cute," she said, brushing her hair back. Classic talk show wisdom. But out there in the real world, words don't fix anything. Oprah's gaze held her. "Then why do you use so many of them?" It landed like a whisper through thunder. The crowd stirred, energy rising, applause threatening to break through. The cameras cut wide, Oprah, still, serene, Jasmine, blinking, searching, caught between pride and realization, and then, as if the air itself had run out, the words stopped. For the first time all day, Jasmine had nothing left to say. Then, silence filled the room. Oprah holds the gaze that refuses to blink first. She doesn't chase the silence, she lets it do the first part of the work. When she finally speaks, it is not a strike but a mirror held perfectly steady. "You said change is loud, messy, uncomfortable," she begins, voice low, even. And you said collateral damage is the price of progress. Jasmine swallows, nods once, eyes flicking toward the crowd for confirmation she cannot find. And earlier, Oprah continues, you told a podcast that listening is just waiting for your turn to speak. You said, I will never let anyone silence me, ever. The audience hears their own memories echoed back at them. The words are familiar because they helped build the person sitting there. Jasmine's mouth forms a careful smile, the muscle memory of a victory lap that hasn't happened yet. Oprah's hands remain folded. You also said people fear what they can't control. So let's test that. If truth is your cause, then control isn't your enemy. It's your responsibility. Jasmine tries to step in, but Oprah gently continues, no rush, no heat. Let me show you the difference between volume and value. Televisions tilt closer. The audience leans in without meaning to. Households lean toward the screen, office cafeterias fall quiet, subway cars pause between stations. Across campuses, students hush mid-scroll. Bars listen, you speak about fire, Oprah says, but you don't notice who you've set ablaze. You call it disruption. The people at home call it fatigue. Jasmine's laugh is too bright. People are tired because nothing changes. They're tired, Oprah replies, because no one is listening long enough for change to hold. A murmur ripples, not applause, not yet, recognition. Oprah turns slightly toward Jasmine, softening the edges of her voice. When a mother works 2 jobs and turns on the news, she doesn't need the catharsis of another argument. She needs someone to hear the question she can't afford to ask twice. Jasmine inhales through her nose, searching for ground. I hear them. I fight for them. You fight in front of them, Oprah says. But do you hear them behind the cheering? The cameras catch the smallest tremor in Jasmine's lip. For a second, she looks exactly like what she is, brilliant, battle-worn, and suddenly unsure of which armor to reach for. She reaches anyway. They want someone who won't back down. Oprah nods. And they deserve someone who won't talk down. The line lands with a thud that feels like truth finding its chair. A few claps escape. Oprah doesn't take the bait, she presses forward with the patience of water. You've said patience is a luxury, she continues. But discipline is not a luxury. Discipline is love wearing work boots. Jasmine starts to protest. Oprah raises a finger, not to silence but to frame. You've had the mic, Jasmine. Now hold the moment. She repeats Jasmine's own phrases, gently turning them over like stones. Loud, messy, uncomfortable. Never silenced. Listening is waiting to speak. Let's make it plain, Oprah says. If listening is just waiting, then leadership is just winning. And if leadership is only winning, then the people are only props. A hush moves through the crowd like a front. Oprah does not lean closer, she widens the space. Tell me, she asks, when did you last change your mind in public? Jasmine blinks. That's not how this works. That, Oprah says, is exactly how this should work. On feeds across the country, a ticker blooms, #Oprah moment. Clips loop, you say you won't be silenced, Oprah continues, and you shouldn't be. But volume is not proof. Volume is just proof you are still talking. Jasmine's shoulders lift, she forces a grin. This is television, Oprah. People don't tune in for homework. They tune in for a home, Oprah answers. A place where they recognize themselves. A place where their pain is not a prop and their hope is not a slogan. The audience steadies, as if the room itself has found a spine. Oprah breathes once. You keep telling us who you are against, she says more softly. Tell us, with the same conviction, who you are for. Use fewer names and more nouns. Not enemies. People. Jasmine's voice scrapes. I am for the people. Which ones? Oprah asks. The quiet ones who never trend? The tired ones who don't clap back? The ones who will never make you viral but might make you human? A sound moves, recognition. Jasmine's chin lifts. She steadies for a swing. I won't apologize for being loud, she says. I won't shrink. No one asked you to shrink, Oprah replies. We're asking you to listen so you can grow. A light flickers in Jasmine's eyes, fear, or memory. She looks momentarily younger, a person who believes fortresses are built from echo. Oprah doesn't strike that softness, she guards it. You told that host you'd never let anyone silence you, Oprah says, voice like a hand placed gently on a shoulder. But somewhere along the way, you silenced yourself. Not with fear. With certainty. Jasmine's breath catches. I'm certain because I'm right. Oprah tilts her head. Or because you're afraid to be wrong on camera. The line is tender and surgical. The audience feels the cut and the care. Jasmine looks away, then back, as if the floor might provide a script she forgot to print. Her voice drops half a key. What do you want from me? She asks. Oprah smiles without triumph. Less thunder. More rain. The words land like a forecast the country has needed for years. The ticker thickens, #Oprah moment explodes into captions and duets. The crowd is standing in their seats without standing up. Oprah gives the moment one last frame. You can win the room, she says, or you can heal it. But you cannot do both by shouting. Jasmine opens her mouth. The answer doesn't arrive. Oprah doesn't rush to fill the space. She lets the truth form its own gravity, and then she speaks the sentence that will be replayed in classrooms and campaign rooms and living rooms for years, each word unhurried, each syllable placed where it cannot slip. When you confuse volume with value, you stop hearing yourself. The words glow in the air like a sign no one can turn off. The audience performs the instinct older than applause. They wait. 1 second. 2. 3. 4. 5. The silence is full and kind, then the room rises, the way people stand for hymns. In that silence, a decade of noise finally ended. The clip hit the internet like lightning, clean, silent, unstoppable. Within minutes, timelines were flooded with fragments of a single phrase. When you confuse volume with value, screens glowed blue with the echo. Someone looped it into a remix before the live broadcast had even ended. Hashtags spread like wildfire, #Oprah moment, #listen louder, #silence speaks. Morning anchors interrupted regular programming to replay the exchange. Every major network ran it on repeat, dissecting tone, timing, the tilt of Oprah's head, the half-second delay before Jasmine's eyes fell. Late-night hosts turned it into monologue material, but even the jokes landed with reverence. One headline read, Oprah didn't end the conversation, she reset it. In New York, a cafe owner watched the clip on her phone between orders and whispered, that's what leadership sounds like. In Chicago, a teacher paused class to show it, telling her students, that's how you stand your ground with grace. On TikTok, creators stitched reaction videos, some cheering, some crying, others just sitting in stunned silence as Oprah's words repeated in the background like a heartbeat. Jasmine's team released no statement. The silence from her side only deepened the echo. When she finally appeared online the next day, her tweet, "Real change always stirs discomfort," was met with thousands of replies quoting Oprah's line back at her. Every argument she tried to make became another reminder of how little listening could do without humility. Cable debates followed, political analysts, body language experts, cultural critics. One commentator called it a masterclass in emotional intelligence. Another said, it wasn't a takedown. It was a teaching. Memes multiplied, Oprah's calm face above captions like let them talk. Then speak once. Even those who'd never watched her before shared the moment like gospel. Overnight, the Oprah moment became shorthand for a cultural correction, a reminder that noise isn't truth, and that leadership isn't volume but vision. The internet, usually a place of fleeting attention, stayed locked on that clip for days. A montage unfolded across screens, newsrooms cutting to street reactions, commuters watching the clip on loop while waiting for buses, influencers recording teary videos about learning to listen. An elderly pastor in Atlanta quoting Oprah's line in his Sunday sermon, when you confuse volume with value, church, you stop hearing God. The congregation rose. Oprah herself stayed quiet. Her team declined interviews. No press release, no tweets, no victory laps. Just silence, the kind that spoke louder than any PR statement ever could. And that silence became the trend. People started posting black screens with the hashtag Let It Breathe, a 24-hour social challenge to post nothing, say nothing, just listen. Millions joined. For a single weekend, the digital world, so addicted to reaction, paused. Meanwhile, the ripple deepened. A young woman in Detroit wrote, I watched that interview and called my mom after 5 years. I finally listened. A senator quoted the line on the Senate floor. A corporate diversity seminar used it as its new opening slide. For once, everyone seemed to agree on one thing: something important had happened, and it didn't need explaining, but not everyone celebrated. On fringe channels and podcasts, voices accused Oprah of performative wisdom, calling her manipulative, outdated, too soft for the new generation. The criticism tried to find traction, but each rant felt smaller in comparison, drowned out not by counter-arguments, but by the quiet dignity that had already captured the world's attention. That was the real shift. The internet, for once, wasn't arguing. It was reflecting. Even people who normally fought over everything began quoting the same sentence in their own language, finding their own meaning. A journalist on NPR put it simply: it wasn't what she said. It was how she waited for silence to say the rest. And still, the moment grew. Fan edits painted the scene in slow motion with piano music. College students wrote essays. A poetry collective titled their next anthology volume "And Value." Even classrooms in South Africa and Manila replayed the video as part of media ethics discussions. Days later, Oprah finally broke her silence in a brief interview after an unrelated charity event. When a reporter asked her how it felt to win, she smiled faintly and replied, "It wasn't about winning. It was about making room for understanding." Then she stepped into her car and drove away, leaving only those words behind. For Jasmine, the story played differently. Her next scheduled appearance was cancelled. Her social channels went quiet. The world had turned her volume down, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Even her supporters, once loud and unyielding, began speaking in softer tones. For the first time, her own followers urged reflection instead of rage. The night after the broadcast, millions tuned in again to rewatch the full interview. The clip's final moments, Oprah's calm gaze, the long silence, the audience rising, played like a collective exhale after years of noise. Comment after comment read the same: "This is what we needed." Yet, in the control room where it all began, a single monitor showed something new. A private message had been sent to the network's inbox, brief, direct, and signed. It read, "I wasn't finished." The producer frowned, unsure who sent it. The sender's name wasn't visible, but the tone felt familiar, defensive, unbowed, and already rising for another round, because even as the internet exploded, one final response was yet to come: "You." The studio was empty now. The cameras had gone dark, cables coiled, lights cooling to a soft hum. Only 2 chairs remained beneath the faded glow, the same chairs that had carried so much tension just hours before. The air still felt charged, as if truth itself had walked through and left fingerprints on the walls. The faint echo of applause lingered, but it was fading, like a memory that no longer needed to prove itself. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass, steady and rhythmic, the kind of sound that cleans rather than breaks. In that quiet, Oprah sat alone. No makeup artist, no producers hovering, no clock counting down to the next segment. Just her and the echo of her own heartbeat, calm, certain, unhurried. She looked toward the empty seat across from her and smiled faintly. "You can win the room," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else, "or you can heal it." A producer nearby froze mid-step, hearing the line, knowing instantly that it was meant to last. Later, that voice, her voice, would carry over the closing montage that played across America's screens. The narrator would call it the conversation that stopped the noise. In the reflection piece released by the network that evening, Oprah's commentary wasn't about triumph or takedown. It was about the difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to understand. Her tone was calm, almost motherly dignity. She said in the recorded voiceover, "Isn't silence. It's choosing not to compete with the noise. It's knowing when your piece is louder than someone else's shouting." Clips rolled behind her words, audience members crying, a young woman nodding, a man closing his eyes in quiet agreement. When you've lived long enough, Oprah continued, you learn that strength is not how hard you hit back. It's how still you can stand while truth lands on its own. Across the nation, people listened differently this time. No debates, no counter-threads, no chaos, just a collective pause. On radio stations, talk hosts replayed the quote again and again, "You can win the room, or you can heal it." The line began showing up in classrooms, in sermons, even on protest posters that read, "Healing is the loudest victory." The narrator's voice returned, "True strength," he said, "is restraint." In an age built on instant reactions, patience became the bravest act. The montage shifted, footage of crowds in parks, workers in break rooms, families at dinner tables, each watching the same replayed silence. Across language barriers and political lines, something subtle but profound began to stir, a hunger not for argument, but for balance the country had been shouting for years, about politics, race, identity, truth. But now, that same country sat, just for a moment, in stillness. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the sound of breath returning after years of tension. Back in the studio, Oprah stood, gathering her notes, her hands steady. A camera operator, still packing equipment, asked quietly, "Do you think she'll come back on the show?" Oprah smiled without turning around. "Maybe," she said. "But next time, maybe she'll listen." The operator chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You really think one conversation can change people?" Oprah paused at the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dimmed stage lights. "It's not one conversation," she said. "It's the courage to have the next one differently." Her footsteps echoed down the hall, the kind of echo that sounds more like a heartbeat than a departure. The screen faded to black, her closing words still playing over the image of the two empty chairs. "You can win the room, or you can heal it." The words lingered, not like a quote, but like a prayer, and in homes across the country, people didn't scroll, didn't argue, didn't move for a long time. They just sat quietly, breathing in the weight of what it meant to speak without shouting, to feel without fighting, to believe without breaking. And somewhere in that silence, America exhaled. The story began with confrontation, two voices colliding under the brightest lights in television. It could have ended there, in argument and noise, like so many moments before. But it didn't. It became something else. A moment where truth chose calm, and calm chose courage. Oprah didn't outshout anyone. She outlasted the noise. And in doing so, she reminded a nation that grace isn't weakness, it's discipline. That the real victory doesn't live in the applause, but in the silence that follows when understanding finally takes its seat. Tonight, we watched the difference between power and purpose. Between winning and healing. Between having the last word, and having the right one. So if you're still here, if you stayed through the storm, through the heat, through the stillness, thank you. Thank you for choosing reflection over reaction, dignity over division. Because moments like this aren't about one interview. They're about who we become when the shouting stops. Maybe that's what leadership looks like now. Not louder. Just clearer. Not faster. Just truer. Oprah's words still hang in the air. You can win the room, or you can heal it. If you believe that calm voices can still change the world, share this moment. Let it travel farther than the noise ever could. Subscribe, not for more arguments, but for more understanding. Because the future isn't waiting for another fight. It's waiting for people brave enough to listen. The camera pulls back, the lights dim. Oprah's silhouette crosses the stage, slow, steady, certain, and as the screen fades to black, her voice lingers like a promise. Let truth trend again.